LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce for Oregon and Southwest Washington. If you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, you can do so on our website, and we're around on social too at ORPIDEINBIZ. Welcome to HR Essentials for Small Businesses, Navigating Risks with Confidence. This is the second session in our Thrive in Business Education series, the People part. This evening, we have Katie McGonigal here from Tangerine Search Incorporated, a certified LGBTBE San Francisco Bay Area recruiting firm with us to present the material. Katie, I'll let you take it from here.
Aaron, thank you so much. Yeah, and definitely recommend the Chamber. We happen to be Bay Area based in California, and we get a tremendous amount from the our local gay chamber. We are here today to talk about lowering your risk, for small to mid-sized businesses. We want to give a big shout out, big thanks to the ORPIB. We're grateful for the opportunity to share some expertise, to learn from each other, and to deepen our networks. So let's see, in the deck, here we go. As Aaron mentioned, I am Katie McGonigal, Chief Operating Officer, fractional CHRO of Tangerine, and we offer the full gamut of HR advisory and recruitment services. We do have the whole range from large global businesses to quite small businesses. On the HR advisory side, I think that small to mid-scaling businesses are kind of a sweet spot for us at this point. A number of our clients are minority business enterprises, women owned, and certainly LGBT plus owned and operated businesses, just like Tangerine. However, we do not discriminate. Just to be clear about that. Thank you for the laugh, April.
Yeah, I think you're hilarious.
I have 25 plus years in HR, in recruiting, in L&D, learning and development, which is essentially training, and OD, or organizational development, which oftentimes helps us focus on the enormously important work of structuring, in terms of, like, if you think of an org chart, structuring your business in a way that will give you the biggest bang in terms of driving revenue, driving impact, and allow you to scale up and down. Because, I think sometimes you have to do either or both over the span of time that you're in business. We are joined by, when I was in-house, I was in financial services, professional services, healthcare, and the last 10 plus years in tech startup at varying stages of growth and funding. As a consultant, I've been able to expand even further in terms of industry and business types, which is a privilege and fascinating. We are joined by our CEO and founder of Tangerine, April Starlight. She will likely chime in to help, like, for example, with chat moderation, but also, for instance, when we take questions. Oh, yay, rainbow.
If you need any party favors, comedic relief, I'm here.
Yeah, she typically has like some sort of hat or tiara or something. It's always, it's awesome. So you should check her out as often as possible. But she herself has founded and run a number of profitable small businesses. So she has that lens, which is great. So given that it is a small group, I would like to go around and just have you say your name, say your company, your industry, and then if you can give me a sentence or two about what you were hoping to gain from this talk. If you don't know yet, that's fine. We can just pass. There's no pressure, no urgency. So just based on who I can see on my screen, Heather, if you don't mind giving us a shout out, who, company, industry, and maybe what you're hoping to take away.
Yeah, my name is Heather. I work as an HR associate at Portland Mental Health and Wellness. So
Awesome.
healthcare, mental health. It's a therapy clinic. And I just want to honestly, like this is my first year in HR. And so I just want to be able to like learn more from things like this and bring it back to my company. It's a pretty small company. It's like we're growing, but we're still in that like, under like 80 employees. So
Sure,
I think
sure. Yeah. So congratulations for, busting in. Welcome, fellow tribe member. And I'm so glad you're here. And mental health, God knows I need all the help I can get. So love that you're focused on that. Thank you again. Amy Menendez, can you educate us, please?
Thank you for having this event. My name is Amy Menendez, and I'm the owner of Sparkle Professional Cleaning. So I'm a really small house cleaning company in Sacramento. And I'm kind of the I don't know what I want, but I know I need some HR. I have currently, I've had up to 5 employees. Sure. I have 4 right now, and this week I'm hiring the 5th and the 6th. Wow. I'm still working right alongside everybody. Yeah. And I have a manager. I've never had a manager, so there's certainly no HR, and so I'm just winging. Yes. I'm winging it every single step of the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Congrats on the additional headcount. That's typically a great sign that you're growing revenue and client base, however you think about it in terms of your metrics. Love the business name, by the way. That's awesome. And love the hustle, just absolutely love it, admire it.
To be in. I've been cleaning self-employed for like 25 years. And
oh my goodness.
An employer. I started a little company when I got big enough in Sacramento, just about 20 months ago. So it's pretty rapid.
Yeah, that's fast. Yeah. And it's funny because, people will say, oh, well, it's not, I'm only 5 people or whatever it is, and it's not very big growth, but it's a percentage game. If you go from 1 to 6 over the course of, 18 months or something, that's very significant growth, right?
Amy, are you joining us from Sacramento? Did you hear about this through the Rainbow Chamber?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I think
I recently certified with the NGLCC too, so now I'm a.
Oh, great. That's great. That's good. It's work. The certs, it's work. I know from experience.
I think next hires that I can get to where at least I've got a few mornings a week that I'm able to do the admin stuff.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah. Yeah, that shouldn't be, hopefully that's not 10 o'clock at night, forever. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Congrats to you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So so I see next Whitney. And Whitney, I'd love to hear from you, please.
Sure. I'm a professional organizer and senior move manager based in Portland with a team of 10, including me. So 4 full-time, 6 part-time. And a couple challenges I'm working on right now are a small group health plan. I've got 2 employees that I'll be paying their health insurance premiums for.
Okay. Yep.
So, in the process of trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
And then another issue we're facing right now is just cybersecurity. So I have a VPN and I have a mobile. We use Bitdefender for our team cybersecurity, and I had people install it on their cell phone and then the laptop or whatever computer they use for work.
Yeah.
But we've discovered that when there's a threat to their device and we go in and look at the threat, I can see their search history. So there's a big privacy issue there, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. You want to correct that.
Figure out, okay, how do we protect ourselves? But
you're figuring it out. Yeah, the cybersecurity stuff, I mean, and particularly in recent years, I mean, talk about something where sort of everyone is learning, on the fly. And April for Tangerine, for example, undertook to become like certified.
Cyber ready, they call it.
Yes, we are cyber ready.
But if you want to do business with a bank, they make you pass the same standards that the bank has to pass, like in order to do like international payments and things. Wow. So a very eye-opening process. Definitely
it's not a small thing. That's for sure.
It's not. Yeah. And even just filling out the application for cybersecurity insurance, I'm, having to look up all these different, I don't even know what some of these questions are. So
Right. You don't,
yeah.
right. How do you answer when you don't even know what you're being asked? And
Right.
even if you do know where you're being asked, you don't know where to go to find it. So it's laborious. It is.
I
feel
have at
you.
least one recommendation that we can give you after this, Whitney,
Yeah.
for a good cybersecurity professional.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
So it's
Thank you.
cost effective and just so anyone that we mentioned, we get no money from mentioning people. Just to be
Yeah.
crystal clear, this is just our own striving, to find the right like vendor partners. And if we find somebody good, then we tend to, kind of shout it to the universe. Okay, cool. So let's this was really helpful because as you can imagine, it helps inform what we cover. And if I have a couple things to go over, if we end up abandoning the slides altogether because this is an adventure we get to take together for a little while, and if it takes us to interesting places, I'm very flexible, just so you know. And the idea is that this is relevant and useful to you. However, if we don't cover things like what you're suggesting, Whitney and Amy, and Heather, in your case, you will have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. And I'm always open if there's anyone in the group that wants to weigh in based on your own experience and findings, please. I learn from y'all as well. All right, so let's keep going. So this kind of classic intro slide, and when you look at the column that addresses, quote unquote key risk areas, we're going to get to that in a little bit more detail in a second. HR gets a bad rep, in my opinion, and I want to say that I understand why. I think there's some good reasons, if you will. I think it's understandable sometimes why that is. The challenge with it is, though, that it can really get in the way of the kinds of work, that can happen, right? Whether it's, the people within your small organization working together at what is classically considered HR work, whether you have a partner, professional in the work, whether you have an in-house person that is devoted to HR, like Heather and her team. But if you have the right folks engaged, you can do some genuinely inspirational, aspirational, dare I say, transformative things, and cover the basics, create the right foundation to protect you, and to improve your employees' work experience. And when done well, these things go, hand in hand, sort of the one feeds the other. So we'll, like I said, we'll talk in a second about maybe where you're most highly exposed. But this last column where it references kind of when to seek support, one of the things that we think about is the concept of when to worry and when not to, essentially. And we often experience clients kind of agonizing over things, over something that they didn't have to. So that's always interesting. And sometimes, let's face it, oftentimes there is risk in areas that they weren't looking at, right? So, you can kind of have both ends of that spectrum. So that takes me to these, kind of key risk areas. And I have a question for everybody. So who here has worked with an HR professional in your current business? April's monitoring chat all the way through, so you can put it. Whitney, raise your hand. So your current business, and Amy's a no. I think we got that, from her really helpful intro. Heather is the work, which is great. So we have a little bit of a hodgepodge there. And who's worked with an employment attorney in your current business? Yeah. Heather's making a don't know face for a sec.
I think we have, but my manager, the HR manager, has dealt with a lot of that kind of stuff. But I do think we have a lawyer that we consult with
for employment related issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So that's helpful. So that's helpful to know. I think about this as I think about the employee life cycle, right? And so one way of thinking about, where are these high risk areas is thinking about it through the lens of the every employee has a beginning. Honestly, they have sort of a pre-beginning, because handling recruitment correctly is really important from a compliance perspective for a number of reasons. But sort of the pre-beginning, beginning, middle, and end, right? And that's sort of your areas of greatest exposure. So, how every touch point of the recruiting process, and then of course how you hire, and then sort of mid-stage, if it comes up, if there's an issue of where performance improvement is needed, and then at the end. So if you need to fire someone or lay them off, or even if they resign, you just sort of are at that's kind of the highest risk areas. Any questions on this sort of this concept of key areas? And if not, I can kind of keep going. Okay. I don't know how obvious this is. It's just it's a way for me to kind of contextualize it. So as we were reminded earlier, if everybody could just take a breath. It's the end of a long day. I'm so grateful to those of you who are here. So I'm just going to take a breath. So this quote is not particularly like meditative or inspirational or something, or new agey, but I do love it because I just want to honor everyone that has taken on this enormous task of founding, running, keeping it alive, a small business, and those of you who are helping to make it all go, like Heather, because it ain't easy. So that's what I like about this quote. And one of the ways certainly that it's not easy is the kinds of things that we're discussing today, right? And there's some things that are somewhat unique to a small business, like the kinds of stress I think that you can endure around risk, right? So question for everyone. Do you currently have, and it might be that I already know this, Heather, I would assume that your organization has, of course, managers, it's laddered because you said you had like 80 odd people. Amy, you were already really helpful and clear that it's you. Everybody reports to you right now. Is that correct? Yeah. Whitney, do you have a level of management in between you and these individuals that you cited?
I do have an operations manager, but I do still manage projects, and I'm still working in the field like Amy too.
Right.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, I'll bet. And then April has me, which was
Hallelujah.
Yeah, which was a change, right? So, the couple of things that I had prepared to cover are based on things that come up with our clients and that have sort of raised their heads for me when I was in-house all those years, with some kind of frequency, right? And so there is a real transition when you go from, and I think, Amy, this is in your future, and there's going to be more than mornings where you can do admin. There's going to be full days when you can, I don't know, there's no beach in Sacramento, but you can hang out, right, by the pool, because it's really hot there. But it is a big transition when you go from sort of everyone reports to you to having a more laddered structure, right? So I have two pieces of advice on this. And the first is to make sure to carve out time to plan and to communicate, right? So, I'd ask you to take a beat and think about the last time in your career, and it may have been a long time ago, I don't know, when you had a new boss and maybe kind of suddenly had a new boss, and what it felt like. Because your communication should include a level of empathy, not sympathy, but empathy, right? For the individuals, it's a big change. And so you are understanding that their manager is changing, but also, the benefit of this is, how are the rules changing, right? Is sort of how I think about it, right? So, two quick examples. One is, it's fairly common that, you put, let's say you have a manager in between you and people who were accustomed to working directly for you, and they continue to come to you, right? That's fairly common. So the better job that you can do from inception, communicating out again, here's what's changing, maybe the why, give context. I'm a big believer in providing context. And then here's how the rules are changing. Because, an obvious reason for creating a more laddered structure is that you need to get out of the weeds as a leader. You need to focus on things that are a better use of your time. And nothing absorbs your time like managing humans, and particularly in certain environments. So another example is kind of a flip of that, which is that you are accustomed to being in the know and frankly having a lot of detail because it's day to day and everybody's talking to you, and you sort of lose that, and perhaps even kind of suddenly. So it's kind of planning for how are you going to let it go, right? There's definitely something there in sort of psychology and day-to-day ops. So that takes me, both of those actually play pretty neatly into my piece of advice number 2, which is, once you have your foundational sort of, management and feedback practices in place, not a lot is going to change for them, right? So if you already have a structure for one-on-ones, for a team meeting, for providing feedback when, performance is subpar, then it's kind of business as usual for them, right? Even if the new person's management style, is even fairly dramatically different, the structure is
So what they're doing day to day is the same.
right. Sorry. Yes, April, exactly. And of course, yeah, the rule is not changing, but oftentimes they need a reminder of that too, right? Because the ground's kind of shifting beneath their feet. So a reminder of sort of an alignment, right? Alignment between the new manager and the person. What is their job? And how does it align to objectives in the business? And so and a big part of those common foundational practices is documentation. And so that can create some kind of real-time transparency for you. If you're really curious about the nitty-gritty, there's a place where you can go and look. And then if you're practicing effective regular meetings with your new management level, you'll work together to figure out what do you need to know, what probably do you really need, you don't have to know. So it might sound kind of basic, but it isn't practiced as often as you might think. And there's a lot of times when I refer to in settings like this with clients, etc., the importance of carving out the time. I know how busy it is. I really do. And I know how impactful it is to the bottom line when you're really on top of things. But carving out that time to plan and to communicate effectively is just, and figure out how rules are changing is huge. Any questions on this, on sort of managing managers and that shift? No, okay.
We do actually have one question in a chat.
Thank you, Erin.
It is whether or not you recommend EPLI insurance.
Yeah.
Employment practices liability insurance for anybody who had to Google that like I did.
Oh, no. Yeah. So, but I just want to be clear. Is that related to what I have talked about, or is that just kind of a good question to get into in just a few minutes?
No, not related to what you talked about.
Okay, that's what I thought. But thank you, Erin. EPLI will address that for sure. Yeah, it's funny. There's so many things offered to you, right, as a small business, and that supposedly protect you, and it's hard to know, what is really needed and maybe what's not. So absolutely, we'll come to that. So along the lines of these practices, so question for you. I debated which way to word this question. It's because it's kind of warning. It's kind of like a trick question either way. But like, has anyone ever struggled giving feedback to an employee, like anticipating giving feedback? Have you struggled with that? Heather, you've never struggled with that? Because if so, I want to come be at your feet and learn from you.
No, I definitely have. I'm more like the entry level person though, so I haven't really given as much feedback. I've definitely been taking it, which is also
No, yeah, and it's funny because you can think about that too, right? Because that there's always two people involved. So you think about your experience of receiving it. And I don't know about you, I think this is, or HR professionals were sort of wired for this, but when I'm receiving feedback, sometimes I'm thinking how I might do it differently, not respectfully, you know what I mean? So I think you learn from that, right? Amy, has it felt like a challenge when you've gone to give feedback to an employee when you knew you really needed to have a feedback conversation? Was that challenging?
Yeah, it's very awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. Awkward's a good word. Yeah.
Doesn't come super naturally, and
Yeah.
you know, like I want to feel kind of more equal, but I'm not, you know, I'm the boss. And
No. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. You have the power of their livelihood over them. And, you know, for a lot of people, many people live paycheck to paycheck, and that's very scary, very scary thing. So I appreciate you recognizing that, because it's real, and it plays a part in dynamics in HR communication often, if we, you know, are willing to really recognize it consistently. So this topic of feedback, it plagues me, and strictly due to the fact that there's so much written about this, spoken about, you know, TED talked about, YouTubed about, et cetera, right? And I think with anything where that's the case, there's a fair amount of poor information, misinformation out there as a result.
Clickbait.
And even if that weren't the cases, there's just the sheer overwhelm factor, right? Like who do you believe almost, right? Like, you know, where do you go? And the reason I've chosen to discuss it briefly is, number one, it can trigger questions, you know, from the audience. And number two, it's a great example of like an area where if you maintain a consistent practice, you're doing yourself and the company such a favor. An example that I give from experience is, you know I can tell you right now today at this time for a fact that I will not remember what was said in a conversation that took place 9 months ago that then appears in a letter from an attorney, you know, related to an employee. And part of this is because of the work I do. Luckily I haven't actually personally been sued, just to be clear. You know, in a letter because somebody's on their way out, et cetera. So my saving grace is this habit, and for me, that's really what it was developing the habit. And it's owing to a mentor I had many years ago. I'm still grateful. And I just don't even think about it anymore. You know, when I have any kind of feedback conversation, I send an email follow up to the person. If for some reason it actually isn't a scenario in which I should send an email to the person, I send an email to myself. Or you can have you know, keep a running document, keep it online in the cloud. Now be careful about where you keep it, right? It needs to be confidential and restricted. So just saying that, but help yourself, right? So feedback is just that. It's feedback. It's not good or bad. I think this is the biggest disservice that frankly our own brains, this is neurology, that causes us when we receive feedback to automatically put it in one bucket or the other. It's also cultural. It's very common in US culture, US business culture, sometimes more so than other places, to receive it in one of two ways, right? It's either positive or negative. And then that's fed by how undertrained so many managers are in the art of giving feedback. And the fact that so many individuals, I dare you, like next time you're in a group of people, ask around, you know, so many individuals have had, you know, Katie, you really screwed that one up. You know, you really messed up, you know, wow, I heard from so-and-so and so-and-so, or the holy them, right? A whole lot of people are saying, don't even get me started on that. You know, that this was bad, right? And that's sort of how they lead and sort of the tone, right? So I don't know about you, but in my life, I shut down. Like I'm defensive. I want to explain, which then I'm thinking, oh, it sounds like an excuse, etc. You're just in this trap. It's what they call fixed mindset, right? Versus growth mindset. So I'm backed in a corner and I'm not gonna receive really what you're trying to tell me. And also I'm not gonna be able to, probably to really get into kind of how do we work together mode, right? So the beautiful thing is that it is a learned skill set, and there are ways to do this well. And so they can be taught and they can be learned. And everyone can kind of be on a similar page based on the unique culture in your business as to how to do this, and then how to document it, because it does not have to be formal or fancy or whatever. It can be honestly almost like as casual as you like. It just needs to be consistent, right? And again, housed in a place that others don't have access to.
Katie, we
So-
have a pretty relevant question here from Whitney about
Hey.
recording conversations. Is it okay? Is it kosher to use like Otter AI, some of these other, like we have the bot in here that's attending our conference today.
Hello, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Is it okay to use, recording for conversations with your team members?
Yeah. So look, my gut response is never without their knowledge. I can think of few things that would be worse for breaking trust than recording them without their knowledge. So the times when I felt like that was necessary, I've gotten verbal consent, and documented it. It's funny, like the computer is my friend. April, I don't think she'll mind me saying, is like a total nerd. And it's like a fun thing that we have, together. So I think I love the challenge of making as many things available to people, your employees, as there are out there that how to use, I guess, and that don't cost a ton of money, because like they might even invite it, like, oh yeah, that'd be really cool. I personally am neurodivergent. I have an attention deficit disorder, and among other things. And so AI note taking has been something I have dove fairly deep, because similar to other tools I used in the past for sort of tracking, information. So there's stuff about it that's cool, and that people could even raise their hand and say, absolutely, Whitney, and that's awesome that I can avail myself of that. But specific to like performance improvement, not just feedback, like we're talking about normalizing feedback, but performance improvement, I think if you have their consent, sure. Is it a way to help protect you in the event that they were to take litigious action? Yeah, there's times when it's not admissible. So also a good question for an employment attorney. Every once in a while you'll hear me say that, because I'm not one. But it depends. I think, it's funny because if you were a client, my first question would be, why do you want to? Right. So it's kind of like, what's triggering that, that desire, because that can tend to mean that something's up, right? Or maybe not. What do I know? Right.
Internally, we use Otter, actually. We use it with our clients. Like if I'm gonna recruit on a position, I might have myself, another team member who does candidate sourcing. We're meeting with the hiring manager, and we'll just get everybody's permission and record it. And that way we're not missing any, information that we need to know. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
For accuracy.
Right. Yeah, I think just to be clear, that's different though than a performance improvement conversation, because that was sort of the context.
Yeah.
I was in my headspace.
Yeah.
Whitney, is that a helpful answer, or is it too vague to actually be useful?
No, that was very helpful. And I mean, I could see in a really serious conversation, you would probably want to get your employment attorney involved anyway. But I was thinking more just to save time on typing up the notes and just to make sure that it was
Oh
accurate.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen people, even before, the kinds of tools that are available right now, like the last few years, I've seen people use different things in really impactful ways that it is more efficient, it's time saving, and it's in a shared space. Everybody can access it. Everybody can add things to it. Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. And I won't remember, even though I think maybe I will. So thank goodness for those tools. So just trying this work of normalizing feedback, right? So the more often you give it, and the more timely it is, And then and really, really jumping on the times when your employee is willing to give it to you, right? So that's one of those places in my experience where you can ask for it 100 times and maybe the 100th time. And some people just for style reasons, they'll never give it to you. But if they see peers doing it, like I've worked places where we put enough time and relentless effort into this, because you have to remind yourself leadership has got to model this behavior. But we'd be in a meeting and somebody might say, Whitney might say, hey, Katie, I think you kind of like cut off that person and they hadn't made their point yet. And I was interested in hearing more of their point, kind of thing. So that's an excellent lesson for me, right? It's helpful to that person logically. And it's great for the other people in the room that also maybe wanted to say the same thing that, wouldn't have, right? So it's that kind of thing. It's like, it isn't rocket science in that way, right? If you start to do it and people see it and experience it enough times, it will feel more normal, and they'll probe more on making sure that they understand and that they know what the path forward is. But it's hard, I guess is the part of my message there. So I referenced before that I had to build this habit of just documenting just automatically, just the minute that, I was done with the conversation that involved feedback, I would just document. We talked about, different types of support and seeking that out. So if somebody raises an issue, something that they oversee or overhear, or something where they would like it addressed and responded to, that's typically a time when, if you have an HR professional somewhere that can help you, and then if it's of a specific nature, again, probably talking to an employment attorney would be helpful. So, any
I gotta
questions?
say your notes, like your follow-up notes, because she'll do this not just feedback, right? Not just like performance type of issues, but even we'll just have a meeting and then I'll get like a nice little summary, like here's what we discussed, here's the to-dos. And it's really helpful, actually, like I can pull it back up, like, okay, what do I owe to Katie so she can complete her work that we agreed on? Or vice versa, if there's anything missing. And I'm just giving my testimonial here, Katie, that like, it is very helpful because it just becomes kind of like a pattern. And especially when you're doing it from leadership, and I've seen her do this with our team members, that then they're kind of like, oh, okay, this is something that we're doing, that it's just very normal. Like, okay, I'll follow up. Oh, this is missing, or this was an important thing that we need to talk about next time, or what have you. And it just becomes very normal and like also easy to reference. And it doesn't have to be like, Whitney, as you're saying, like time saving. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to get every detail, for it to be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will give April some cash later, but I'm glad that that's thank you. I'm glad that that's helpful. Not really. I don't give her cash.
Cash and prizes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But it's just, habits and practices that you can get into that can help you avoid considerable like loss of sleep, pressure, stress. Any questions about this? Okay. I think we're kind of at the end of this part, and then we'll get into people's, sort of curated work here. So I did think, so this is 2 slides, and one is sort of examples, and then the other is also more specific examples. But the idea was to get into some nitty gritty, because I always have a sense that when someone sees a header like mitigating risk in small business, that they're thinking about these kinds of things, right? Like straight up, legal compliance, things that you can get audited for, fined for, things that an employee can go down to the labor board and say, so-and-so did this and it was, an illegal practice, et cetera. So they're important, right? They're as important as the other things that we've been talking about. And the good news is that with an HR audit, you can make sure that you have your ducks in a row, if that translates for everybody, that you have everything tied up, and be aware that in employment law, things change. And also be aware that the other sort of element of complexity is that it will differ, sometimes fairly widely by state, sometimes by city, by county, et cetera. So, but, again, once you are armed with, the right knowledge and you're following the steps every time, you're in good shape. You're not going to get a letter that's surprising or scary. You're not going to get a fine, typically. So, so just some reference to a couple areas that are probably obvious to those on this call. But payroll is a place where just you have to be compliant with local and federal payroll laws, right? And you can surprisingly actually pretty quickly get into kind of a world of trouble when that's not the case. You'd be surprised, even in a small business. And the payroll laws do differ, by state. For example, one example is how long, if you fire someone, so fire or lay off someone, in other words, they haven't resigned, that's typically a different timeline, just to make things more confusing. But if you fire or lay someone off, the amount of time in which you have to get them their final paycheck, and in Oregon, it's the next business day, right? California, it's a different timeline. So again, with the planning, the pre-planning, so there's again, that communication angle, telling them what's going to change, telling them that someone's going out without telling them why, if it's a firing, for example. So there's some scripting involved, but also, and reassuring people, because oftentimes it's, oh, who's next? This kind of can be the feeling. But also that there are, there's logistical things. In some small businesses, having to pay let's say you try to do end of day, having to pay somebody by the next business day means cutting a manual check. And let's say overnighting it, and because you want a signature if they're remote. So again, it's like, that's not necessarily hard. It's just, you have to plan for it. You have to, there are logistics involved. Now this is another place where I think people hear or read about things that aren't going to be relevant to you. Like, if you're doing a layoff, let's say you're, I don't know, the last couple of years have been tough on a lot of small businesses. It depends. And let's say it's a real layoff. In other words, these jobs are sort of going away, 1 or 2 or 3. And someone might mention like the WARN Act. It's WARN in caps. It screams at you. That's in Oregon. And I think California too, but it's over 100 employees. You have to worry about WARN Act. So like in Heather's case, they're getting there, right? And it's more money because it's a longer, like, severance, time. It's a lot more work because there's a lot of paperwork, et cetera, involved. And there's a very specific way in which you have to follow through on the procedures. So either, you need to know about it and sort of be concerned about it and plan ahead, or not. Oregon, funnily enough, has something called the predictive scheduling law, which requires you to provide a written schedule to all employees. It only applies to companies with more than 500 employees. But it's like, again, if you didn't know, it can kind of bite you. And if you're right on that cusp. So hopefully those are some perhaps random, but helpful examples. How you classify workers is hugely important. I think what's made a lot of news lately is contractors, and part of it is like the whole world of gig workers, right? Uber, et cetera, being under fire, having huge fines, et cetera. For how they're classifying workers. There is a litmus, it's called the ABC test. If you've tried to parse that, congratulations. It's not for sissies. But for, how do you know that someone is genuinely a 1099 contractor to your business? Or do you need to classify them differently, and how you employ them, how you pay them needs to be different. Unpaid interns I threw in there because there are some great programs out there. I'm happy to communicate with folks offline that you could perhaps take advantage of, that are funded. So these individuals are paid not by you. And it gives you access to underrepresented talent, to disabled talent, to transitionary military talent, et cetera. And there are pretty strict federal guidelines for what you need to do with unpaid interns. And a lot of it's around training, like cross training, for example. So letters, agreements, contractor agreements, separation agreements, those tend to be quite complicated. That's an area where typically an employment attorney creating those is probably your best bet. But just get it done correctly the first time. And Save yourself a lot of pain. Question for the group, is anybody in your business, has anyone expanded into a different state or country? No, Whitney. Heather, no. I'm assuming Amy. No.
Just Washington.
Yeah, just Washington.
Okay, so you're in Oregon and Washington as a business? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, we just have a couple employees who like are based in Washington. They're
remote from Washington.
but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so just, again, I find that it's something that people don't necessarily plan ahead and maybe don't give themselves enough run time. It can take perhaps a surprisingly long time sometimes to register with a different state for payroll taxation purposes. And of course, there's mandated reporting, just like with any state with payroll taxes. Of course, you all know this because you've built businesses. You have to register, right? Officially register. Nowadays, there's some pretty great like vendors online. It's not that expensive and they'll have a physical address for you. Or, if somebody needs to deliver something, they can, but you still have to officially register with that state if you have employees working out of that state, or if you're doing business, out of that state. But this is just, again, to say, I always use California and New York because they're the gnarliest. But just to show some examples of how there are different rules and regs that you need to follow. In New York, when you terminate someone, there's some written documentation that has to go to like the state level Department of Labor at the state level. So that, again, just an example, not something that you wouldn't necessarily just know, right, from intuition, right? Okay, so that's so this is sort of a wrap-up slide that encapsulates some of the things that we've talked about, and I am eager to hear from you. So April or Aaron, April, do you want to read me some chat questions? Make sure we get to those because people took the time to write them down.
I think we're caught up actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Look at us. Except for the EPLI, right?
Yeah.
Anything else that we haven't covered? And then I just want to give people another chance. Yeah, Whitney, if you knew me, you would know how much it pains me to say this, but there are others who would be more expert in answering that question than I, people who specialize in business law, insurance, even maybe your CPA, but I wouldn't put it at the top of my list of things, to make sure that you have for a shield. How you incorporate can go a long way, LLC, et cetera. And again, I'm not fit to advise people on that, but they're, I think what happens is what I see often is that people really are sufficiently shielded. And for whatever reason or reasons, they're sort of drawn into these, these other shiny things that may help in the case of ... but maybe you don't actually need it. So, but I think it's a worthwhile question. And, I think probably your CPA, or at least they would know, they'd have a better idea even who to ask, or your insurance person if you have a broker. Not everybody does. Yeah.
I'm so curious. Was it your broker that brought this up to you, Whitney?
Yeah, Whitney, or did you read an article or?
No, so I belong to a nationwide group of companies who do similar work to what I do for a professional association. So one of my colleagues had an experience in California and shared.
Of course, it was in California.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, well, shared her terrible experience and said if you had that insurance, it would have. So it was just kind of a hard lesson learned.
So someone said that if they'd had that insurance. Yeah, that's magical insurance. I don't know if I can think of I don't know what the issue was, but maybe it would have helped. I don't know about coverage altogether, but yeah, it's I just this stuff is rough because it gets at us at this very human level, right? Oftentimes, I mean, this business is your baby. You built this, this thing, and you nurture it every single day, and you hire the best that you can, and you tend to care about these people. I mean, you're not necessarily giving out hugs or whatever, or but you care, at some level about these people and about their experience at work. And you do a lot to try to ensure that that's as positive as possible. And when individuals kind of turn on you, that's a little bit of a dramatic phrase, but it's personal, right? It's surprising, and oftentimes that it's, so and it's hard not to, it's hard to trust after that. It just is. Like, I'm not Oprah, I'm not Brené Brown, but I'm just trying to say that that's where this hits us, right? When these issues arise, it's we're human. We can't take that element out of it, particularly when you're small and when it's yours, right?
Katie, I gotta say, so when, I was in business maybe 2 years. Like, I had been a recruiter for a decade, started my own company. It was going pretty well, global pandemic notwithstanding, right? And then a lot of places started hiring. I need to bring on a team. I was completely overwhelmed. And in my brain, right, like, I was going to be able to hire someone who just had like the rules, like the rule, like you just do this and that, because in a way I can be very mathematical, which I have since learned is sort of naive. Like, the thing with HR is that it is so, there's like best practices, but you're working with people. And one thing that I've really learned and picked up from Katie is that, like, consistency is super important. Taking that time, like you mentioned, Katie, taking a step back, going, okay, where is my business at today? And am I close to like a growth mode? Is there something I need to be aware of before expanding? Or am I going to be going into another state? What have you? And I'm also thinking about some of our clients that we've worked with. And then from there, doing kind of like a full scale diagnostic of, what are we working with? Do we have a warehouse? Do we have people doing physical labor? Do we have, we had a client come to us, they have a dance studio. People were touching each other, right? So it can get complicated depending on what you're doing. But having having taken the time to really examine it, set up policies, and also it helps so much with onboarding. You hire somebody new and then you're able to say, here's our value statement. Here's what we're doing, and it's day one or week one, this gives them a sense of like, okay, this is the values of the company I'm working with, kind of puts them in that mindset, and you're setting the tone. And then, when you're doing things consistently, like Katie's mentioning, if someone comes back and is like, with an accusation or something, you don't have to wonder if you said that. You know exactly what you would have said in that kind of situation. You know exactly what you've put together. So I think, for me, and it's still something I struggle with because I want like the right answer. I want it to be like accounting, like you reconcile your books and then you get the little green check mark. It's all done. Everything balances. We're at zero. But it's not that, because it's people. And so it is, a little bit more dynamic. But that's one thing I got to say, Katie, that I've learned from you about, just the people side of running a small business is having a little bit of consistency, taking that time to think about it. And then the other thing is, if you have to fire someone, if you have to have a tough conversation, scripting that, not going in, you need to warm up.
Yeah.
You need to have that kind of, if you haven't done it before, if it's not something that has been a part of your like professional life, definitely get a little bit of coaching, and that's something that has been super valuable. And I did unfortunately have to fire someone, and Katie's advice was wonderful. She said, start the conversation by saying, this is going to be a tough conversation. Which I wouldn't have thought of that. But yeah, you don't want to greet someone, hey, how was your day? Okay, well, you're fired. Right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw kind of my 2 cents in there as the small business owner, that doing some of this groundwork, doing some of this homework has helped me sleep. I want to say that it has helped me sleep a lot better, but in reality now it's just different things are keeping me up, right? Like the work that we're doing is keeping me up, making sure that we're like, delivering for our clients and finding these people and setting them up for success. That's the thing keeping me up, and not like, did I leave, it's not that thought of like, did I leave the door unlocked kind of thing, you know that followed through on everything that is right for you in your business at your size where you're at.
Yeah. And curated to your needs. Cause like, Amy, Whitney, you're both probably good examples of like, there's playbooks out there. There's, it's HR consulting firms, for example, a lot of times it's, my joke was, it's like, buying a Maserati when you just need a Toyota, you know what I mean? It's like, your needs are what they are. And Amy, in your case, it's a specific business, it's not, what people might think about and think of normally as, in terms of an office setting and, oh, we have meetings in a conference room and stuff like that, whatever. You guys meet, but it might be on the fly, let's say, so, and you have physical aspects to the work and supplies, right? Your supply and logistics, and your biz dev, your business development is different, right? It's, your demographic is fairly materially different, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, so curated to your needs, and also just you can prioritize, right? You don't have to do all of it all at once, is all I'm trying to say, right? So what's probably needed right now, and then you just become aware of like, okay, and we need to get these other fundamental, sort of business practices in place, and we'll take the next, whatever it is, year or 2 years to get that done. I also, highly recommend talking to your people, and please believe me, I don't say that with any like judgment or sarcasm. It just really just like you might be surprised, if you ask. One of the ways in which I feel like this used to show up is we would do sort of a benefits review annually when you're in a larger any organization, but certainly in the bit larger organizations. And it was, well, we got to have, this and that, and then I would go out and just, what did they really care about in terms of their benefits package, right? And sure, there's health and vision and dental if you can do it, right? But what else? And I mean, people came up with stuff I would have never thought was a priority, and they didn't care at all about stuff that I thought everybody liked. So again, what the heck do I know? You learn by asking, right? What's relevant, timely, important to folks, and it may be different than you think, even as close to the business as you are. So big fan of that. The other thing I was going to say quickly about what April was saying, and thank you so much for what you said, April. And I believe, I wish there was it was black and white. I can't tell. I mean, I have a whole career of, like my executives, looking at them and watching their faces fall, because I was saying it depends a lot, right? And well, it's kind of a case by case basis in some cases, and they weren't pleased with that answer, and I get why, right? So I wish there was that too, but like April said, just people are a wild card. We just are. And things like we talked about, there's complexities, and things are different depending on where you are and what you're doing, right? But the last thing I want to say about this, excuse me, was that when you do have a more sort of rigid approach, where it's like, oh, this is how we are compliant, and we're going to stay, we're going to like have a death grip on this. I've seen it and experienced it where that can work against leaning into your values as an organization and doing the right thing by your employee. Also, it being too vague, and like from the top there being too much gray area. No, we could do this or do that and communicate it this way or that way. So it's kind of, you want a happy middle if you can, right? Where you have the right foundation in place. That generally you're compliant, but you're also going to look at different situations on a case by case basis, and you're going to try to do the right thing by the human being involved. And sometimes doing the right thing is like, firing someone and quickly and fairly intensely. And ideally they have down the road, they learn something from it, because usually in that case, they did something that really wasn't okay, right? Within the context of your business. So it's not all like rainbows and flowers and unicorns. But yeah. Amy, any questions from you, just given and it's okay if you don't have anything, but just given the specifics of your world.
Well, I don't know if I have questions, but it is really amazing how you touched on, the challenges that I have faced. I did just fire somebody, a week ago.
Mm,
And, last year again, I guess in my gut, I knew I had done the right thing, but I had pushed back. I didn't fire somebody, but I was trying to, in my knowledge that I had, try to do some sort of beginning stages of disciplinary.
action. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she quit, but then still filed for unemployment
Yeah.
with a
With
very
the state.
yeah, and with a claim of something, egregious that I had.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow,
Yeah.
well, if I had done something really wrong, then the EDD would let me
Yeah.
know.
They investigate every single time. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, months had gone by and it was closed and she didn't get the unemployment because it was a baseless claim. But
Yeah.
I remember feeling like, oh, I feel like I would have known if I did something really egregious, even though I really learned along the way.
Yeah.
Some things I just learned really recently about where I wasn't compliant.
Yeah.
Wow, like I didn't know that. I didn't know I was supposed to be that I'm required to have not 3 anymore, but 5 days of paid sick.
Yeah. Yeah. Sick days. Yeah. Yeah. Retirement savings, that was a pretty recent change. They went from 5 or more employees to 1 or more employees in California. You have to offer retirement savings.
I can't afford it, but I'm like, well, I guess I better start looking into it.
Yeah, that's actually not the plan that we signed up for. Well, we're on like a year free deal, but it's $4 per month per person. So
Oh,
I get it that those things add up, believe me.
yeah, okay.
And also and people can elect not to
Yeah.
take advantage of it as well.
You don't have to contribute. You just have
Right.
to offer them the 401k.
Right. It's not like you have to match or anything. That's usually a larger company that'll do that. So
Yeah, so I saw
yeah.
that. Oh my gosh,
I know, it's scary. Yeah, it's scary. And I hear you on all the tough, I mean, as somebody who's like, this is my work, and I still like firing is a perfect example. I absolutely learned very much the hard way and by making mistakes, and probably more times than I would like to admit early in my career. And fire fast is a lesson that I learned very much the hard way. I am a manager who believes wholeheartedly in giving people every, resource that I possibly can, and understanding how their, personal lives integrate into their professional, et cetera. And, but it would have been better all around. Frankly, most times it would have been better for the person, and certainly for the company and for me and the rest of the team had I let somebody go earlier. So again, those are, but somebody coming out of the blue with an accusation, and it not knowing, like, in the world how to get there, like how did they get there? How could you have done that? That's a you feel kind of nutty, when those things come up. And I think other small business owners would absolutely agree and share experiences with you around that. And it's hard. I think one thing to remember, and I have to remind myself of this sometimes too, is like, you are the face to maybe at that point the worst day of their life, maybe one of the worst days of their life. You're the face to that, the face and the voice, and and so it's not rational always or logical, right? There's a lot of feelings, and when we're afraid, which it's a normal thing to feel when you lose your job and the security of a job. I think we in particular we act out in ways that maybe aren't normative for us. So I'm not saying that you have to spend forever trying to understand that, or that it's okay if someone does something that's not okay. I'm just saying that I think about that, just that they're coming from a place that's fairly altered, primal, honestly, sometimes. So
I remember feeling that I knew I'd feel relief, and everyone, like you said, it was for the benefit of the team, and I knew I'd feel the relief. But I did reflect that evening that I said, I don't take this lightly. Disrupting somebody's life.
Yeah.
It's not a frivolous.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like you've done the exact right thing as you've learned from it. There's maybe some things you would do differently next time. And I relish the reminders about how important it is to hire well. I do. And when I'm on the fence and I still hire somebody and maybe even for reasons that aren't particularly like, I don't know, professional, I know someone who knows them. I don't know, some random thing. They worked for an organization that I think is unbelievably cool. Pick an arbitrary reason. It doesn't tend to work out phenomenally well. So you almost, one way to think about it, like when you're recruiting and when you're hiring is like looking toward that end state, and what might that be like? So, but you can't predict how people will act. It takes us back around to why this is case by case basis, is you can't predict human behavior. Or if I could, I think I'd be like a billionaire, maybe.
I'm going to share in the chat here. So I've got both Katie and my LinkedIn profiles. We'd love to connect with you.
Absolutely.
And then both of our email addresses. Feel free to reach out if we can help you in any way. This is a big part of our business, is helping small business. We especially, love supporting other queer-owned businesses. But not limited to that, as Katie's point. And then also, we've got a great network. I have spent a ridiculous, insane amount of time networking. So I know excellent employment attorneys like, Amy, if you need one, we know a couple of folks in
They're
Sacramento.
actually local to you. Yeah. I mean, not that it matters, but yeah, it's nice.
I mean, like we have options. Whitney, for your cybersecurity, like be happy to make introductions, at least, give you like the beginning starting point if things.
Yeah, in case that's helpful. Heather, I'm on about 1,000,001, listservs and groups and all those things. And if you ever want, I don't know if there's like specific advice that any way that I can help out, extend a hand to another person making their way in this wacky world of human resources. Just let me know, because that's what it's all about. We got to help each other, all of us. It's been an honor and a privilege to get to meet each of you and learn from you and hear about your businesses. Congratulations on making this work thus far and growing. It's really exciting. And hopefully this information has been helpful. And we're, let's just, we'll stay connected. Erin, any other housekeeping items?
I think that's about it. You were great.